This is going to be a video on my homemade snow skate. In this video, I will explain my inspiration for using a snow skate to be used with the wind wing. I will give a little background as I know it for the snow skate, my build or my building of a snow skate, and I will also conclude with my thoughts and feedback on what I think about using a snow skate with the wind wing. A snow skate is a snow sliding device that combines elements of snowboarding and skateboarding. The snow skate is bindingless and its focus is on tricks, and it's also very versatile because there's no bindings to step in or step out of. 3 years ago, the inflatable wind wings became popular and people were trying to learn how to wind wing on skis and sometimes a snowboard. A few years ago, some local wingers were buying the snow skates to be used with the wind wing. However, the boards, they were short and they wouldn't track through the snow the same way a longer snowboard would. The snow skate was never intended to be used as a wind wing. It first started to be used on the snow the same way you would use a skateboard on the pavement. So they were short. The snow skates, which originally intended to be used as like a parking lot idea, then became longer to be used on a hill for tricks and slides, and now have become more of a mountain board type idea. So they've become longer. In the last year, these boards have become longer, meaning 151 centimeters long. That makes them more suitable for using on the snow with a wind wing. The concept of using these with a wind wing is so new that the company who builds and sells them, Hovland, doesn't even market on their website of them to be used with a wind wing. Not convinced this strapless snowboard idea to be used with a wind wing was a good idea, I decided to build one myself. I started by looking online for a used race snowboard, or hard plate snowboard as they call them. These boards are narrower than a typical snowboard, narrow like the way they're using them with the snow skates. I couldn't find a used race snowboard online and realized I had a spare snowboard that I wasn't using. So I was going to pull the bindings off that and use that as my base plate. Now that I'm using the wider snowboard, I can't put a skateboard deck on top of it because the top deck needs to be a bit wider than the bottom deck to allow leverage to turn the board on edge. So at Home Depot, I bought a 48-inch length piece of aluminum for $54 and a 48 by 24 inch and 5/8 inch thick piece of plywood for $26 Canadian. I cut the aluminum pieces into lengths the same length as the base plate of the snowboard binding. I clamped them together and then drilled holes through and put bolts through so that they are now fitting together in the proper shape. I eyeballed the screw holes in the snowboard deck and then drilled through the aluminum so I could then now use the snowboard bolts that came with the snowboard bindings and then put the bracket onto the snowboard. I cut the piece of plywood to the shape that I thought would be useful and then placed that on top of the board and brackets. I used a handful of tiny drill bits and I screwed through into the brackets, and I left these tiny screw bits in there and they kind of held everything in place. So now I detached the bracket from the other side of the board there, flip it over, and then I drill bigger holes for the wood screws to fit in. So I used wood screws to attach the bracket to the board. Now that I had the plywood with the bracket screwed on with wood screws and the snowboard attached with the brackets, I had to join them together. So I put them together and then put the bolts in between, which was difficult because I have to get my hand in between there to get the nut and screw these together. So that was probably the hardest part of piecing this together, was attaching those two brackets together at the end. And anyway, it's pretty much of a hack job, but I did all this in one evening. That weekend, I took it to the lake with perfect conditions, with good winds, with my 6.0 wind wing and the board ready to go. I had no problem getting started was sometimes tricky because you have to have it angled in the right position, otherwise you're going to slide off because you're not in bindings. And I get going in one direction in a straight line, trying to go edge to edge or carving a turn. I could not do that, and I have lots of years of snowboarding experience. Mike, who has the Hovland Bubba board, can go edge to edge. He has a lot more experience with this type of board. My second observation was that where I cut the nose of the board on an angle like a surfboard, that was my idea. That was a bad idea because as I put my foot up front there on the edge, it would slide off. So the front of the board was not shaped properly. If I was to reshape this board, what I would do with the nose is I would shape it like a peanut rather than like a surfboard. So the front edge, when I am putting my foot on the edge to leverage it over, it'll have some resistance or some grip, as opposed to the front of the edge turning away and my foot sliding off. Without having bindings on this board, it's really difficult or impossible for me to do slalom turns on this board. I'm going in one direction and holding a steady line. And for me, that sucks a lot of the fun out of snowboarding or wing snowboarding, whatever you want to call it. The style I prefer is lay down, carved jibes and slalom turns, going edge to edge. I can't do that with a snow skateboard, but not having bindings is a real nice feature. If anyone has a better way of attaching a snowboard to a deck as a do-it-yourself idea, please post and let me know. The company that builds and sells these boards complete, called Hovland, the price is pretty good if you take into account how much time and materials are used to build one of these boards, and their price includes the snowboard. However, if you already have a snowboard, you can buy just the brackets off them. I don't know if it fits a regular snowboard. It's just their Hovland snowboards, but they sell the brackets, and the brackets, I would say, are probably the hardest part of the build. So I would do this again. I would buy their brackets and then attach that to a snowboard if I was going to build one without using their board. But if you don't have the board, I would just buy their whole system complete. I won't be surprised if Hovland or another company starts selling top decks and brackets just to be mounted on a regular snowboard. Something where you can pull your bindings off and put this on for the days that you want to go snow skating with your wind wing or kite. For me, this is the end of my snow skate journey, and I'll be looking forward to see how this evolves.